one of the major hazards that we bring to any study is our own traditions and what I call tangled tethers. How far are you willing to stray from the text itself? There was, of course, originally Mosaic Judaism. These were people who believed in the Torah, the laws of Moses, directly. We'll call that, for lack of a better term, Mosaic Judaism, the Judaism of the Old Testament. But as time went on, there were those that embraced what they called the oral law. They added to what Moses wrote with other rules, 613 of them actually, and they end up being codified in a thing called the Talmud in the 3rd through the 6th centuries A.D. And the Pharisaical Judaism is what Christ, when he shows up, he preaches against. Many of the conflicts in the New Testament are his rebuttal of these self-imposed rules that did violence to what God intended as he expressed himself through Moses. And the tension between Pharisaical Judaism and Mosaic Judaism is in part what accounts for those confrontations that we've encountered in the Gospel of Matthew already. As you get after the fall of the temple, fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, the Judaism has a huge problem because they've been taught that by the shedding of blood, only by the shedding of blood is remission of sins, and now there's no place to shed blood, there's no temple, there's no altar. They had to redefine Judaism, so they had the Council of Yamnia in 90 A.D., which began this trend to redefining Judaism to what we see today in large measure would be more properly called Talmudic Judaism. They spend more time studying the Talmud than they do the text itself. So the point I'm getting here is the tether is getting a little longer each stage, going from the written law to the oral law, and then from that oral law to the written down oral law called the Talmud. It went further. When you get to the 12th century, you have the rise of the writings of the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, which goes even further. In fact, it actually even inverts some of the teachings of Moses. It literally is an attempt to unveil the Father's nakedness where they're speaking of the Godhead itself. And so the tether is getting so bad that there was a reaction to some of that. That led to the Hasidic Judaism in the 18th century, 6 centuries later. But each step of these things involves what I call tangled tethers. They're using the anchor of the text. Their tether from that anchor is getting too long. They get themselves tangled up into their own definitions. So that we're all victims of traditions. This is just one chain that is relevant to our studies. They drift away from the original anchor of the text itself. We now know from computerized studies that God gave Moses the Torah letter by letter. It has properties that only are sustained by not omitting a single letter. But there's another danger that we have, perhaps more subtle, but one I want you to be aware of, and that's where we harmonize the Scripture. We find two accounts that are different but similar enough. We assume they're the same account, that one of the two writers just didn't quite get it right. Are they really recording the same thing or not? Most of those are in the periphery, not really serious. But the Olivet Discourse is one of them. Is it past or is it future? The preterist would have you believe it deals with things of the past. And yet that has some problems we're going to take a look at. The Olivet Discourse, is it really the same briefing in all three Gospels? Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Or are they several briefings with different audiences and different emphasis? We'll see.